for Wellness Week, so no pressure, but you're setting the bar for the entire week. So I appreciate you coming. But we're going to kick off Wellness Week because our speaker this morning is actually a trip that we're going to take on Wednesday. So he's going to kind of give us a little background of his and just where his passion for farming and everything came from. I can actually credit him being here, the Robleys, because Al came to me and said that we went to the marketplace and we just enjoyed the whole thing. Got to see a lot of fresh and local things, and they were really appreciative of that. So I dove into his story, and I'm like, man, he's got to come. So we appreciate you. And without further ado, Davon Goodwin.
Thank you so much. Do you want me to use a microphone or?
That would be great.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But you can take it off if you need to.
Okay. So thank you so much for having me this morning. I'm Davon Goodwin, owner and operator of OTL Farms, which stands for Off the Land Farms, which is located on Highway 15501 in Laurinburg. And last year, me and my wife, we opened a marketplace at OTL Farms, which is kind of like a farmer's market indoor setting where you can get everything from fruits and vegetables. We have ice cream and grape slushies and a lot of other goods that are grown around the state of North Carolina. So my story in farming is kind of unique. I don't come from a farming family. I'm originally from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Came to North Carolina to go to school at UNC Pembroke in 2007. And that's kind of where the story began. My degree is in biology and botany. So growing up, all I wanted to do was be a botanist. I wanted to travel the world and have my PhD, and that was the goal. Well, obviously, as you know, college is expensive, so I took on a lot of student debt early in my college career. And I started losing focus my freshman year, so I had the great idea to join the Army, my freshman year, and I thought that joining the Army would instill, obviously, kind of the passion back into me and also to serve my country and also the discipline that I felt I was lacking. And so my freshman first semester, I joined the Army. And didn't tell my parents at all. I just joined, and after I got in, I told them. I knew they would not want me joining the Army. Obviously, in 2007, we were heavily in war in Iraq and Afghanistan. And so joining, I didn't really know a lot about, the military since I don't come from that. But I felt like it was a great decision for me at the time. And so 2 years into my service in the Army, my unit was on Fort Bragg. I was in heavy airdrop, so 824th Quartermaster was my unit, and they came to us one day and said, "Hey, do anybody want to sign up for a deployment?" And I said, "Well, hey, I'll do it. I'll put my name in." I really didn't think they would call me, and so 2 weeks later, they called me and said, "Hey, you've got picked up to go to Kuwait and Iraq." And so I was kind of nervous, obviously. Once again, I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell them at all. I didn't think it would be a good idea to tell them. And so getting ready for deployment, kind of get nervous and end up getting deployed in 2009. And midway through the deployment, the Army had this great idea to shift my unit to Afghanistan. Well, obviously, we did not prepare for Afghanistan. We prepared for Iraq. The missions were totally different. And so my unit at the time split us in half. Half the unit stayed in Kuwait. The other half stayed in Afghanistan. And so instead of, picking us, my platoon just said, we'll volunteer and we'll go. And so obviously being one of the lower enlisted soldiers, I didn't really have a say-so in that ask. And so got pushed over to Afghanistan. Obviously it's a different theater of war. By being there about 6 months, on August 31st, 2010, my vehicle hit a roadside bomb. And that's kind of where the farming story began. Once it hit that bomb, I had a traumatic brain injury, so I forgot most of everything up to that point, and I also broke my back. And so being medevac to Germany, obviously being 21, a lot of thoughts are going through my head about, what the future looked like, and I developed narcolepsy. And so sitting there in the hospital, I'm kind of thinking about, what is my next move going to be? Obviously, the military thought that at that time they were going to retire me at that time. And so it was kind of like, do I go back to school or do I look for a job? And so one of my professors, Dr. Debbie Hamner, she was a plant pathologist at UNC Pembroke, I kind of called her and I asked her the question, do you think I can go back to school? I think a lot of times in life you need someone else to believe in your dreams more than you do. And I thought I could go back to school, but I think with the injuries and the narcolepsy, especially like falling asleep in class a lot, I was kind of doubtful of returning back to school. So I did it anyway and went back and finished my degree. And the whole time while I was at Pembroke, I couldn't understand how do Robinson County has so many farms but have so many people who are food insecure. It really didn't make sense to me how we can grow so much food, but people don't have the access to it. And so while at the university, I asked, kind of asked that question about, why do we have this issue? And nobody really had the answer. And my professor said, well, why don't you just become a farmer and you can solve that answer? So I said, well, how hard could farming be? I didn't know nothing about farming. I seen farming. I seen the big tractors. I really didn't think farming was going to be super hard. But I was in for a whole world of new, exciting adventures. So by the time I graduated, I met two doctors out of Southern Pines, Dr. Neil Griffin and Soledad Griffin, and they had what they considered a small farm, and they were looking for a farm manager. And so I applied for the job, and they told me just to come out to the farm and look around and see if I liked it. And the farm was 500 acres, so it was not a little farm. And so I didn't know anything about farming, and their approach was just come out here and just learn. You'll learn as you go. And so that was a whole journey of itself. We did everything from sheep, pig, goats. We had about 300 acres of forestry. Then we had this 10-acre muscadine vineyard. And with the whole farm, I kind of fell in love with the vineyard. Grapes became a passion of mine. I just loved the whole, mindset of growing, and never ate a muscadine grape in my life. Never knew North Carolina even grew grapes. My first time eating a muscadine, I kind of fell in love with the grape. Obviously, it's super sweet. It made my mouth itch. I ate so many. And from that day, I kind of felt like, growing grapes is going to be kind of like my passion, my thing that I kind of took from that farm. And so 5 years ago, me and my wife, we bought the property on 15501, which is 47 acres. And so at this point, we have 7 acres of grapes. And so looking back at the whole journey, I really think there's two roads that we're on in life. I think that it's your road, and I think there's God's road, and they're not the same road. And so that day I got blown up, that was kind of like my sit-down moment with God, for him to kind of redirect me, not to change my course totally, but for me to kind of have a different service. And so when that bomb went off, literally, everything went haywire. And so what I took from that situation was that the life I was living was a really good one, but that wasn't the purpose of, what God wanted me to do. And so when I came back, I had this high level of passion to serve. And obviously, into my military service, still trying to figure out how I was going to serve. And so food became my service. My new mission became, how do I grow really high in food and make sure that the entire community have access to it? I don't believe you should have a farm in your community and you can only drive past it, but you can't access what that farm grows. And so it was kind of like my new project. I really call it like a social experiment. Can two non-farmers make it in today's agriculture? Farming now is complicated. Obviously, with the high price of land, the inputs and the equipment, it's tough for two non-farmers to pull it off. And, Scotland County and the Laurinburg community have supported us through leaps and bounds. It's been amazing, from just the start of the vineyard now to the marketplace, how the community has kind of rallied around us to kind of see this farm grow. And it kind of goes back to that point of service of, I'm just in service of the community, so I'm kind of going where y'all tell us to go, and that has been kind of like the way we approach the farm and the marketplace. We thought with the marketplace, it was going to be an extension of the farm, and so we wanted people to have access to the farm and what we grow 7 days a week. And so that became, our newest project. And so a whole along this journey, still trying to figure out, how do you get people across the county to have access, no matter what your economic barriers or social barriers could be. And so far, I think we're doing a pretty good job. I think it's that service that is, I think, key. And I think that service to others is something that, we don't forget on the farm, and that, we want to share, my journey and the journey of Scotland County, with the community. And I think that, Scotland County is a great place to raise a young family and a young farm. And so I'm just, we're here for the ride and kind of seeing where it takes us. And so that's my story.
We're so glad that those professors encouraged you to keep
Yeah.
going.
Yeah, I mean, without them, I don't think I would have done it because so the military did not want me going back to college. So I had to sign out of rehab to go back to college. So the Army thought that being in a college setting was going to be too much pressure. Being in a class, kind of a closed classroom where you have, you know, just a lot of pressure that the Army thought that was going to be too much. So they gave me an option. I can either stay in rehab on Fort Bragg or I can sign out and go back to school. And my mom was kind of like, I'm already losing in a sense being in rehab. I wasn't doing well. I started to, drink, and with the medication was obviously not a good combination. And I think the thing that the Army didn't do well at that time was they kept me in isolation. So after getting wounded, isolation is probably not the thing that you probably should be doing. You need to be around people and kind of have accountability partners that make sure that you're accountable to yourself and also to others. And so I start going down this path of like negativity, being really angry at the situation. And my grandmother, who lives in Charlotte, obviously being a person of faith, she took me to church one Sunday, and I was so angry. I did not want to be there. I felt like at the time, kind of questioning God, like, why me? Like, why did you choose me to get blown up that day? And I got up in front of the church and I told my story. And from there, it became like not my burden to carry. It became the community is going to be kind of like my savior at that point. And from telling the story that day, it became something that has been like my therapeutic, outlet of just telling my story, and make sure that other people, know the story and that you don't have to carry it alone. And so I think the military, I agree with them in some sense that college, it was a lot of pressure, but with having a traumatic brain injury, you need your brain to start working. And so even though, school was very challenging, they stayed after class with me, they stayed at night with me. And so the university really pulled out the, red carpet treatment. I mean, they made sure that whatever I needed of services at the university, they made sure I had them all to complete my degree. And so it's something that I think going to a smaller institution, if I went to a really large college, I don't think I would have had the same treatment, but being at Pembroke, which is, a smaller, institution in our class, especially when you're doing biology and botany, classes are really small. So the professors kind of knew me on a personal level. So I felt like that was really leaned in to help me get to where I want to go. Yes, ma'am.
If someone like you wanted to start out, what would you tell them in terms of what you found out that might be lessons learned?
Maybe not to do it. Yeah, I mean, there's going to be a lot of work. So I work 7 days a week. We don't take any days off, and farming is a sacrifice. And a lot of people ask me like, why don't we have more young people in it? Well, that's probably part of the reason. I mean, there's no vacations. There's no, I don't want to go outside when it's wet and it's raining, it's cold. To really find, when a lot of people ask me that question, I really ask them, the why. Like, why do you want to do it? If you want to make $1 million, I would say this is probably not what you want to be doing. But if you want to, have I think a really great life, serve your community, grow good food, have fun, your kids grow up around farming, I would say that it's a good outlet. I think the hardest part is just, I think, even though I underestimated the work, I mean, you're thinking it's going to be like a 9 to 5. When it gets dark, it's over, and it's like, no, that's not it. And I feel like we don't have a next crop of young farmers. That's part of the problem. With your average age of farmer being 60, where is that, young person to follow up? Because once they stop, the knowledge that they have for their whole life, it gets lost. And so you need to have that mentor farmer, like I had a ton of them, just ask all the stupid questions that's in your mind, and I think that we need to make avenues where young people have the access, where land doesn't cost you everything you have, where you can actually make a go at it. And I think right now with the way North Carolina is getting to where we're a fast growing state, becoming really popular, we're losing a lot of farmland. And once you lose it, obviously you don't get it back again. And so that's part of the problem that I advocate for is, how do we take someone like myself who has a passion, take them from whether it's the battlefield, whether it's the university, into wanting to farm. And that bridge is kind of not there. Obviously, I volunteered on a lot of farms to kind of figure out what I wanted to do, but those opportunities are not always present, for young people to be able to do.
Did you know anything about growing change when it started?
Yep. So I was a mentor with Norrin Sanford. Yep. So he was a big help, and actually, without Norrin, probably would never have found Scotland County, because when I got hurt, Norrin was kind of like my first clinical psychologist. So him and Dr. Debbie Hamner, they were kind of like my support system, obviously, and work with Growing Change. The youth became kind of like my accountability partners. Obviously, from them come from challenging backgrounds. They really didn't take, I mean, they honored my service, but they did not take my attitude well at all. So it was really good because even though they're really young, they were able to check me in a way that most people wouldn't. So in a regular therapeutic session, you may look and say, well, I'm not going to challenge him on his behavior because I don't want to hear his reaction. Well, these youth did not care about my reaction. They kind of wanted me to kind of be provoked. And I think even without them, I think the story could have been a lot different. My grandfather, he died of a heroin overdose, following up from Vietnam. And so my grandmother knew immediately what the situation was going to be. And so they never let me be alone at any time. Like if I went to the bathroom, the door was open. It was annoying, obviously, but I look back on it, and a lot of soldiers don't have that support system, where you have a whole community rallying around you to kind of be your best version of yourself. And so I think that when I talk to a lot of soldiers, that's the part of the farming and service that is, to me, kind of like one-to-one. Obviously, I think growing is very therapeutic. And at the time, I needed to see new life. Coming back from war and obviously seeing a lot of destruction and death, you need to see, new babies being born, new plants come out the ground, just so you can know that, life is still real. I think, when you're in the service, especially getting hurt, you lose that sense of, I think how gentle life could be. And I think, working with Growing Change and Norrin, they kind of instilled that back in me that, you still have a long life in front of you, and that even though one chapter ended, this new chapter is beginning.
Are any of those young men still doing any kind of agricultural stuff?
Some of them, I mean, most of them have really good jobs. So a lot of them work for Duke Power. A lot of them are linemen. And so the project and the program was almost a 95% success rate. And so, I mean, you're taking kids who may have been falling through the cracks of the system and kind of made them upstanding citizens, and and it was kind of, when you look at the whole program, the way it was structured, take someone like me who kind of needed a support system, and the youth needed the same support system. You don't see it on the surface, but we kind of needed the same things. And being in a group together where everybody has kind of went through their own trauma, you put it all together, and I think a lot of good has came out of it.
I know Debbie Hamner's proud of you.
Yeah, and I mean, without her, I think I just think that you need people to kind of believe, and I think at the time, obviously, going to school for biology and botany is very challenging by itself, but just having somebody say that you can do it, is kind of like gave me that motivation to say, you know what, I'm gonna do it. Because her whole thing was, you already got blown up, so what's the worst that can happen? I mean, there's nothing at the university that is going to be as traumatic as that. So it was kind of like, well, I don't have nothing to lose at this point. So I mean, if I fail, I just fail. And the whole kind of glimmer of the story was my first test was not the grade. I got like a C, and I was devastated. And she was like, well, the rest of your classmates got C's, and they have regular brains. So she was like, well, all we got to do is figure out how to focus. And from there, I had better grades from there than I did before the accident. And it became this whole thing of almost like a competition, kind of pushing myself to be better than the rest of the students. And having the traumatic brain injury, I forgot everything from my freshman and sophomore year. So it was kind of like during the day I would learn the new stuff, and then at night I would kind of read the books from the previous 2 years to kind of put it all together for it to make sense. And so, yeah, without her, I think the story would have been a lot different. Yes.
I think your family is different than who lays on farm.
Yeah. I think it's great. I think they just get to run. I mean, it's open spaces. I mean, they eat stuff outside. I mean, my daughter who's 5 now, I mean, like all the sour weed that's in the field, they like to eat and chew on it. And they don't. They my daughter normally doesn't have shoes on, and so I think from me growing up in inner city to them having just open space and just to run without having to worry about cars and I think being in the northern part of the county where there's not a lot of people, you know. It's just a different environment. I think it's a beautiful way to raise kids. I think it lets them be able to explore, you know, a lot more than you know being in the inner city. And my son, who's now 13, he doesn't like the fact that he don't have as many friends around and that's obviously. So he has chickens. So the chickens is his friends, you know. We're down. We have 2 left now. He hasn't learned to listen, so he leaves the door open, and so the coyotes have got most of the chickens. And then about a month ago, we had a hawk come down and kill one of his chickens, so he was devastated. And he tried to, you know, he brought the chicken in the house that was obviously not a good idea. My wife did not like that, and it broke the chicken's legs, and so he tried to nurse it to health. And he had to learn, I think, the life cycle. And so I think it's one of the things that he gets to learn that, you know, life is fragile. You know, and I think from a kid's perspective, I mean, he was devastated. And we went outside, and he has a little burial plot that we put, he has a little headstone that he made. So he took it kind of hard, which obviously I look at it just a chicken, but he looks at it a lot more deeper than that. So it's kind of been, as I'm raising them, I'm kind of like raising myself at the same time because obviously being in an inner city, I didn't get the opportunity just to be able to run and not have to worry about, you know, violence outside your door. And so with them being on an open farm where they can go fishing when they want, I think it's a beautiful thing to see how that growth has, you know, grown over the years. Yes, ma'am.
Talking about family. Tell us a little bit about your wife. What's her background?
Yep. Yep. So Kenya, she's from Westchester, New York. And so we met
Where
at
your family's from?
Yep. So we met at Pembroke. You know, was 18 years old in biology class. You know, at the time she was supposed to be an OBGYN. I was gonna be a botanist and travel the world. We was gonna have this fancy lifestyle. Laurinburg was never in that dream. I look back on it. We were supposed to drive real fancy cars and wear white lab coats all the time. And now she's a nurse in a PACU and more regional. You know, and I'm a farmer. You know, and so I think that she's been with me ever since, and she was with me before the accident. We were obviously girlfriend and boyfriend then. You know, so she's never left. You know, me since 18. And so somebody who just have a real good spirit, you know, come from a real strong family. And we never would have thought, I mean, we used to drive past and drive through Laurinburg. We were like, we're never staying here. You know, we're never going to be here. And now I think we love the lifestyle. I think that, I don't think her family never thought that she would end up on a farm, you know, and so they kind of laugh about it. And so now I think that we kind of look at our roles career-wise as her whole thing is more after the fact, and I'm kind of like more preventative medicine. So if you eat right, what does that look like? And she's kind of like, what happens if you don't? You know, so she's been an ER nurse, she's been in PACU, and so I feel like she loves to serve, and so we're kind of like a family of service. My mother, who's in the farm store, so she left Pittsburgh and left her career to kind of run the farm store. Yeah, she's nice, and she's a trooper. So she'll complain about she don't get days off because we're open 7 days a week, obviously, you know. But she just had a day off last Friday, you know. And so yeah, I mean, just being a family that wanted to serve. You know, my grandmother had a whole life of service. You know, I kind of grew up in the food pantry at church, you know, and it just became always been instilled in me that, you know, service is the utmost thing that comes first. You know, you serve others, then you serve yourself. You know, and I think that that's been my mission ever since, and I think it's a lot stronger now. And the whole thing now, I feel like, is to figure out, you know, how can we make, you know, Scotland County stronger? You know, this is just one farm, but, you know, how can we grow not just the farm, but the community as a whole? And I think it comes back to that service. You know, I think if we serve each other, you know, we don't have to always worry about the outlier issues. And I think that a lot of that is being lost, that sense of service. You know, so I mean, our whole thing of the farm is like, can this be the spark that kind of sparks, you know, younger people to come back to Scotland County and kind of kind of see the growth that I think can happen, I think will happen in Scotland County.
Got the land.
Yeah, I mean, you got the land, and I think the whole thing is the opportunity. Obviously, a lot of the land is still held in the families who've been here, for a long time, and land is very, it's sensitive. It's, your family has worked for hundreds of years, and you just don't give that up real easy. And I think that even the thing I try to tell, older landowners is when you pass it down to your kids, are they going to keep the story going? So even though your family may not farm it, will they let another farmer keep it going? Because what we don't want to have happen is Scotland County lose kind of like that heritage, and we start seeing, obviously you're going to see more solar. So obviously a lot of people don't like the solar, but you'll see more of that. And then, I mean, obviously we need more population, but we don't need it at the risk of our farmland. And I think the thing why you see so much solar is the fact that, a lot of farms see that as an outlet to keep the land in the family, because that price you get per acre is a lot higher than what, row croppers are getting. And so I think there's a balance in that, how much land do you put into solar or you put into development versus how much open land that we keep. Because you need open land. I mean, you need it, and it's important to keep the land here. But if you don't have a next crop of young people wanting to farm, then as a landowner, what do you do with all this land? Because once you pass it down, your family has to decide. They don't want it to be a burden. So you just don't want to have land there that you're paying taxes on that you can upkeep. And so that's why I think we have to really strive hard to figure out, kind of like that avenue of, how do we get more young people into farming? And a lot of young people, they don't want to farm thousands of acres. They don't see that as an outlet. It's more smaller, niche. Like, obviously, we grow grapes, and so that's kind of like, niche. I would never want to have hundreds of acres of grapes. It's just a different production system that I think the next generation, I think that 50 acres and below, I think is what they're interested in. And I think Scotland County could be that place where we can obviously get more young people to move back and start investing back into Scotland County. So I think it's coming, and hopefully that's the thing about that I stress to my family, that our farm and the store has to be successful, because it has to be able to be a model to say, we can do it, we don't come from it, so you can do it too. And so it's real important for the farm to be successful, so we can encourage that next person who looks at Scotland County as maybe somewhere where they want to raise their family, they can do it and also farm at the same time.
How neat it is for you to have a nurse in your family with kids running around.
Yeah, yeah. It's important, obviously. They're tough though. We try not to, when they cry, we try not to pick them up right away, and obviously since they're outside, they're going to get bit by ants and everything else. And so I think that, but obviously them knowing that their mother's a nurse, that kind of helps. And so we have, my daughter, she gets a scratch. We have tons of Band-Aids, so she's a Band-Aid kid. And so, I mean, she get a paper cut, she needs a Band-Aid. And so that's one of the things that I think that it's important too, just because I think that when me and my wife had the conversation about health in the community, since she works in the package, she sees a lot of health-related surgeries that could have been avoided. So that's why when you go into the farm store, it's kind of modeled off of, try to encourage people to like change their eating habits. Obviously, we have ice cream and slushies, but we have a lot of other things that kind of promote a healthier lifestyle.
But I will say, even with your ice creams, they don't have high fructose corn syrup.
No. No, and so the ice cream comes from Riverbend Creamery, which is they're a fifth generation dairy up in Lincolnton, North Carolina. And so their milk is a lot easier on your stomach, than a lot of milk in the store. And we also have raw milk. Yep. And so they have about 250 Jersey cows. And recently we started, raw milk. So a lot of people are into raw milk, so we sell a lot of that as well. Yes, ma'am.
About waste,
Mm-hmm.
and everything is perishable.
Yep.
And canning and freezing, how do you do that?
Yep. So that's what a lot of our grapes does go into, So when we have some of the grapes that may have blemishes or bruises, or bug bites, those get harvested for our juice, jelly, and slushies. And a lot of the other stuff that's in the store, we have a couple farmers who have chickens, and pigs. They'll get all the waste that when something goes bad in the store, they'll come and collect and feed to their animals. And so we try to not to throw a lot away. And we do give food to the food bank. So church community services downtown. We do give food to them. And so the whole thing is, the goal is not to throw away anything, just because somebody else could use it. I think the art of canning and freezing, a lot of young people do not know how to do that. So I think that they throw away food that could have been canned, but they just don't know how. So we get a lot of that. And right now would have been strawberry season, which is highly perishable. So we have a whole cooler section of like jelly strawberries that are still really good. It's just too soft that people don't want to eat, that people buy for juice or jelly or slushies. And so the goal was to try to have like a zero waste system to try to prevent throwing anything away. And so I think a lot of the livestock farmers, especially like during pumpkin season where pumpkins go bad, they can come and kind of offset their feed bill. And so that's kind of how we're working on that. Yeah, I think young people just, I won't say we're lazy. It can be perceived that way. I just think that time and really having somebody to show you how to do it. And you can do it online, but it may not turn out. Like a lady, she brought me some, it was supposed to be jelly, and I don't know if she didn't do the right pectin mix, but it didn't set. So it was more like juice, And so it was her first time, so obviously not judging anyone. It was good, it just didn't set up. And so, but yeah, and that's the thing that extension, like we were talking about before, extension has classes on, canning and food preservation. And I think a lot of people just don't know about the resources that are in our community. We always look at everything from a deficit perspective, like what we don't have, but there's a lot that we do have. Any other questions? Yes, sir?
Since you were talking about solar earlier, have any of the solar guys gone to sheep farming?
Not around here, but like up there in Ellerbe, Norman, Montgomery County, there's a farm that has about 300 sheep on the farms up there. And so most solar companies will give you the open invitation, and they'll have, the good thing about the solar grazing is you don't have to worry about predation because it's completely fenced in, and the fence goes in the ground, so you don't have to worry about things getting in. And so I think, our next, other than growing peaches, which is our next endeavor, we did grow sheep before, so that's going to be like our next endeavor. The kids want more to play with, so that's one reason. But then just to figure out, like, I think there's a market for it, and North Carolina Cooperative Extension, they have a whole program on solar grazing. It's becoming like a bigger thing for people who don't have land. There's so much solar around it. You could probably not even graze at all. And so that's one of the things that a lot of younger people are looking at, that they may have enough land for the sheep to come home to, but not enough to graze. And so the solar companies will open up because they don't want to cut the grass. It costs them money to cut the grass. So if you can go in there and graze it for free, you get the grazing, and obviously they get the less of a mowing bill. It's kind of a win-win for both. Yes, ma'am. Well, we only grow grapes, but we did vegetables in the past, and the reason why we stopped growing vegetables was just it's so labor intensive. The labor is the issue, and being in the sand is the issue too, obviously. But I think that's what's hurting a lot of produce farms is the labor or the lack of. It used to be where you could go in the community, especially in the summertime, get kids, who are not doing anything, be able to pick. Well, those days are probably over with. We tried that on our farm, and I don't have the attitude for kids like that because they want to be on their phone, so that's the problem. They want to be picking with one hand and on their phone on the other hand, and so that's the problem with that. And the whole thing with the sandhills is being so sandy and so hot, you really have to really be really good to grow a lot of vegetables. The fruit loves the sand, but the vegetables seem that you have to work really hard on keeping them, really good. And so I think that I think there's a market for it. I just think that a lot of people is the labor part. You know, planting is really easy, but getting it picked is the hard part.
Where is your farm stand?
Right on Highway 15501, like going north to Aberdeen, right after the traffic circle. Yeah, it's a big black and white building.
We're gonna go visit it Wednesday if you wanna come.
Yeah.
How did you get all that stuff? Everything from North Carolina?
Yeah, it's a lot of driving. And so, like Thursday, I have to go pick up the ice cream. And so by the time I do the ice cream and the milk, that's like 7 hours, you know. So it's, we try to pick up multiple things on the way because most of the things are going to be towards like Charlotte, the Piedmont, or the mountains. And we do work with like another farm that is in the mountains. He'll bring us things from that region to the farm. That kind of helps out. But a lot of it, we have like one vendor that will like deliver to us. Most of it is picking it up. And so that's the problem. Like we spend a lot of time on the road sourcing these products and getting them to the store. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, we try really hard to make it as nice as possible so people can feel, you know, obviously we're appreciative of the support, and we wanted to show the community that, you know, we needed something like that in the north part of the county. There's not a lot in that part of the county, and I think people have responded very well so far.
How do you find new products?
Yeah, so obviously like Instagram, you know, other farm stores. So if I'm traveling somewhere and I see another farm store, I'll go in. But the biggest thing is we ask people like, what do they want to see? You know, so a lot of the things in the store has been like more customer, you know, requested. You know, so for instance, like the castor oil we have in there, the fire cider, we have magnesium butter, tallow butter. All that came from, you know, people wanting that. You know, and I think that people are becoming more health conscious about, you know, and they want to know where their food comes from. And I think that more people who lean into that will kind of lean into requesting certain products. Because a lot of these products they have to go on the internet to get. So like the tallow, they will have to order it on Amazon and then get it. So now would have been in the store, they can just come to the store. And so it's been kind of a win-win with that. And the biggest thing is when you come in there, I mean, if you see something that we don't have, you know, we'll try really hard to get it. And most times we're able to find a local source from it. And that makes it easier for you not to have to drive everywhere or have to get it online. Any other questions?
Let's hear it for Davon.
Thank you. And I look forward to seeing y'all on Wednesday. Y'all come out and see the farm.
Yes, for those who are not signed up or are interested, we are leaving Wednesday morning to go to his farm and to the marketplace, so you can sign up in the Wellness Week notebook. All right. Well, this is our first event for a very exciting week. We have eco printing this afternoon in the MMEC. If you're not signed up for that, you can still sign up for it. If not, we'll see you on the next one. Thank y'all.